this is just a little video that I'm making to test out some of the effects that I have with the editing software. It's not to do anything fancy. Although, you know, I may go out and do some fancy stuff later. I was just looking at the Internet Movie Database, and there's a new remake of the Sam Peckinpah film Straw Dogs coming out. Straw Dogs. Hard to believe that film actually came out 40 years ago, you know, with Dustin Hoffman in it. Film I think few people remember, but it was celebrated at the time in 1971 and somewhat reviled for its really graphic violence. Still packs a punch even today. 1971 was an interesting year for violence in cinema, kind of a landmark year. That was the year not only that Straw Dogs came out, but also A Clockwork Orange and Dirty Harry both came out that year, as did also, I believe, The Godfather. All kind of landmarks of cinematic violence. So that was, you know, a year when it was still fairly early going in the Motion Picture Ratings Administration's history. I think that had started out just in 1968. It was when the new freedoms that cinema had at its disposal were beginning to be taken advantage of in earnest by the studios, and they were starting to compete with television basically by, you know, having more frank depictions of violence and sex and things like that. They didn't have digital effects yet, so they couldn't do dinosaurs and flying saucers with any great amount of conviction, so it was sex and violence. That was the thing that sold tickets. And Straw Dogs is a particularly violent and disturbing film about a kind of a nebbishy intellectual type. In the version that Peckinpah made, he's an American astrophysicist on sabbatical in England with his English wife in the English village that she is a native of. And, you know, turns out that the natives of the village are, you know, pretty primitive and violent bunch, and, well, long story short, they rape his wife and try to lay siege to his house, and he ends up going from nebbishy intellectual to unstoppable killing machine, all in the course of a 20-minute climax that's one of the more unforgettable things I've ever seen in a film. This new remake is set in the United States, and instead of a nebbishy astrophysicist, we have a kind of a pacifistic, Chardonnay-drinking liberal screenwriter who's trying to work on a new screen project, I guess, in the southern town that his wife is from, in the big old stone house that she grew up in. And it's essentially the situation transposed from rural Britain to rural America circa right now. And it looks like there are some important differences. The writer and director of the film is Rod Lurie. Rod Lurie is a perfectly fine filmmaker. He's no Peckinpah, but he's a political filmmaker, basically, whose films always have liberal themes to them, probably most notably The Contender, the film that's sort of a critique of Clinton-era sexual politics. If you haven't seen it, pretty good movie. Susan Allen and Jeff Bridges. It's great, actually. So this guy is kind of a stolen filmmaker. For him to take this, you know, forgotten classic by uncontestably one of the great American filmmakers, Sam Peckinpah, and do a remake of it, it's kind of an interesting choice for him to make. Excuse me. One thing about Peckinpah is that despite his reputation as being kind of a fascist, the truth is that on screen, his politics aren't really all that clear. He makes movies that are kind of more explorations of, you know, the animalistic nature of man. His films aren't really political tracts so much. Whereas with Lurie, he wears his politics right on his sleeve, and I suspect that what he's doing with this new remake of Straw Dogs is, instead of being a kind of evolutionary psychology-based exploration of human nature, what he's kind of doing is he's saying, okay, liberal America, here's what we're really up against with these brutes. This is what really confronts us with about it if we're going to survive it. You know, I'm not arguing whether he's right or wrong about that, but I suspect that's what the more overtly political theme of this film is. I don't know if I'm going to see it in a theater or not. It takes a movie like Avatar to actually get me to go to a theater these days, but you know, I'm for sure going to check it out when it comes out on video because, you know, I mean, it'll be interesting to compare the work of a current, highly skilled, not necessarily a very artistic filmmaker, but a man whose ideas and whose gifts I respect, compared to one of the great instinctive, primitivist, savage poets of American cinema of a few decades gone by. Be interested to compare the two products. So I plan on checking that out when it comes out on video. Well, I guess we've had plenty of time to check out the effects now, so that will be the end of this one. And, you know, thanks for listening.